What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. Last week we did several breakdowns for the FBI. One of those was looking at who the FBI thought had a chance to make it into the college football playoff, and I got to thinking about that, thinking about doing a video myself. And so I started just looking at the teams that I thought had a chance to make the playoff this year, and I narrowed it down to 13 teams. I think there are 13 teams that have at least a little chance to make it into the playoff. So if your team is not on this video, I think you've got a 0% chance to make the playoff. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. I just don't see your team getting in. And some of these teams, I think the percentage chance is very, very small, but I see a path. So this is far from a prediction. Don't take the top four teams and think that's how I'm gonna have my playoff. Those are the four teams, or that's how I'm gonna rank them, or anything like that. I'm simply basing this off of who I think has the best chance to get in, based off of how good the team is, and also based off of their schedule. And I'm going to show you each team's schedule as we go through this, just to kind of back that up, and again show that some teams might be better than others, but other teams might have a better path than others, and because of that, you get the teams in this order. So we're going to start with number 13. Number 13 team I don't really think is a top 13 team. Maybe they are. They have potential to be, but because of their path, I think that they should be on this list, and that's USC. USC comes in here at number 13, and the big reason here is simply because of this schedule. Take a look at the schedule. Notre Dame is their only real tough game. That game will be on the road, and that is going to be, again, a very tough matchup there. And you've got other challenges. You've got Utah. You've got Arizona State on the road, maybe even Cal on the road. UCLA, a team that's starting to turn the corner, it seems like. But overall, I mean, USC has a really good chance to win every game on the schedule, outside of, maybe Notre Dame. Maybe that's a game where they're going to be an underdog, and maybe not. Notre Dame has a lot of question marks. So USC, I think, has a chance to get there, because I think they have a chance to run the table here. And then, of course, you would have a Pac-12 championship game. I don't think they can afford a loss because of this schedule just not being all that tough, unless we see some teams surprise in the Pac-12. But you don't have to play Oregon or Washington in the regular season, which I think is just a huge win for them. And it's the reason why I think USC has to be on this list. Now, again, I don't think I think they're nowhere near a top 4 team. But at the end of the day, if they go undefeated, I don't care who you are. If you're a Power 5 team and you go undefeated, unless there are 4 other Power 5 undefeateds, it's going to be hard to keep this team out of the college football playoff. Because the schedule is tough enough. So I think USC in this conversation at number 13. Number 12 is Cincinnati. Cincinnati has a legitimate chance this year. And I'm going to tell you right now, Cincinnati runs the table. If this team goes undefeated, again, unless we have 4 undefeated Power 5, Cincinnati will be in the college football playoff. They are the first group of 5 team. And I think we maybe had this with Houston a few years ago, where they had a schedule that I think would have gotten them in if they had gone undefeated. But since that team, I think this is the first team that's had a chance to really have a shot at the playoff, because you've got Indiana and you've got Notre Dame. Unless those 2 teams just turn out to be terrible and they're both 6-6 or something, which I don't expect to be the case, and that would be the only way that Cincinnati would not get in the playoff if they go undefeated. Now, obviously, it's going to be tough to beat Indiana and Notre Dame. It's going to be tough to beat UCF. It's going to be tough to win your conference championship game. But I think there is enough on the schedule, again, where Cincinnati will have a really good shot to get in the playoff, again, unless some of these teams are just a lot worse than we expect. So Cincinnati is a legitimate playoff contender this year. I've got them at number 12. The FBI gives them a 1.2% chance to make it into the college football playoff, and I did not give the percentage on USC. FBI gives them a 0.8% chance. 0.8% chance. So, again, the teams that I'm putting on this list, I would say all have at least a 1% chance to get in. USC might be around 1%. Cincinnati might be around 1%. But again, if they win out, if they go undefeated, Cincinnati is going to be right there in that conversation at the end of the season, and I think they'll be in if they go undefeated. Number 11, North Carolina. North Carolina comes in here as I think the favorites in the Coastal, just because of their beatdown on Miami last year. Although when I just evaluate these 2 teams, I think Miami is right there in that conversation with North Carolina. Miami didn't make it on this list, but that's mostly just because they play Alabama in the non-conference. But yeah, you look at North Carolina and you look at their schedule. They don't play Clemson during the regular season. They don't play anyone really all that tough in the non-conference. So yeah, this is a team that has a real shot. Well, they do play Notre Dame. I take that back. They do play Notre Dame, but I think North Carolina is going to be a little bit better than Notre Dame this year, even though that game's on the road. But the thing is, they don't have to win that game. If they lose to Notre Dame and they win every other game on this schedule, all it's going to take is an upset win over Clemson. So that's why I think they have a real shot to get in. It's going to be tough, and Miami's going to be coming for revenge. You're going to have Pittsburgh on a short week on the road. There are challenges on this schedule, but it may all come down to that Clemson game. If they can pull off an upset, I think they would get in. And what happens if they beat Notre Dame and they beat everyone else here in the regular season and they lose to Clemson in a competitive game? Then maybe North Carolina could get in. We just saw that last year with Notre Dame. They lost to Clemson in the ACC championship. It wasn't even a competitive game, and they got in. So I think North Carolina has a legitimate chance. I think this team's going to be really good, and I have them here at number 11. Now, the FBI on North Carolina, they give them a 4.2% chance to make the playoff. 4.2% chance, so a little bit higher than the teams that we had talked about before. The Tar Heels, number 10, is Notre Dame. Notre Dame just talked about North Carolina and Notre Dame playing each other. Notre Dame here at number 10. They're probably going to have to go undefeated. I really don't see that happening. I think there are too many holes for this team. And the schedule is tough, but it's not so tough that you would say there is a game or two that they're just really going to be a big underdog in. Wisconsin is basically a 50-50 game. USC, I think, is close to a 50-50 game. North Carolina, the same thing. So, yeah, there are several teams that could beat them. They could trip up, a lot of different places here on the schedule. But they will have a chance to win every game. Cincinnati, I have to mention them as well. They'll have a chance at least to win every game. So I think the path is there for them because the schedule will be tough enough, but it's not so tough that I think they can't beat a team on this schedule. So it's interesting with Notre Dame. I don't really see them getting in the playoff, but again, they could squeak by and beat everyone here. It could happen, and the FBI does give them a 10.5% chance to get into the playoff. So I think Notre Dame has to be included in this conversation. Number 9, we're at Iowa State. Iowa State has a great chance to get in according to the FBI. They have them, I think, with the 5th best chance, a 40.6% chance to get in the playoff. I think this is a top 6 team. I really do. I think, when I'm ranking these teams, I think they're right there about number 6. I think they're going to be really, really good. But the schedule, you're going to have to more than likely play Oklahoma twice. And yeah, Iowa State could split. They could beat them in the regular season or maybe even in the Big 12 championship. That wouldn't be a huge surprise to see them beat Oklahoma this year. It would be an upset, but it wouldn't be too big of a surprise. But then when you look at the rest of the schedule, can they really beat everyone else? It is so hard to beat everyone on your schedule. You have Texas, you have West Virginia on the road, Kansas State on the road, you have Iowa in the non-conference. It's just a schedule that I think is tough enough to where Iowa State's going to have a hard time getting there with the record. I just think it's going to be tough for them. But the team is good enough, I think, to be in that conversation. And again, if they can beat everyone else and they can split with Oklahoma, whether they win in the regular season or win in the Big 12 championship game, I think you would rather win the Big 12 championship game, lose on the road. But either way, they're going to have a chance to get in. And so Iowa State, I think, is a serious contender. And like I said, the FBI definitely agrees with that. At number 8, we have Texas A&M. Texas A&M is a team that has a really good shot to get in. And I think the path is similar to the path that they had last year. Alabama is going to be really good. Once again, they look like they're going to be a monster. Bryce Young looks like he's going to be another superstar at quarterback. So let's say they don't beat Alabama. Well, look at the rest of the schedule. They've got a chance to beat everyone else. I mean, their toughest game probably going to be LSU on the road. Maybe Ole Miss on the road will be a tough one. But other than that, they'll be pretty big favorites in every other game on the schedule. So again, the path is there for Texas A&M to lose to Alabama, win against everyone else, and hopefully you get enough help. Last year it wasn't quite enough, although there are plenty that would argue that they should have been in the playoff, and maybe they should have. But I think it got them close last year. If they do it again a second year, maybe it's enough to get them in. But they also do get Alabama at home, so you never know. They might even knock them off. And if they pull off that upset, they could potentially go to the SEC championship, even with a loss, and win that SEC championship and get into the playoffs. So Texas A&M, a team that I think has a really good shot to get in. How about number 7? How about LSU? Nobody's really talking about this team. Look at the schedule for LSU. They also play Alabama, of course, on the road, and we're going to talk about the same scenario as Texas A&M. Let's say they lose to Alabama. Look at the rest of the schedule. It's very manageable. You know, you've got Auburn with the first-year head coach. You got Florida with a new quarterback at home. Ole Miss is going to be a tough one right before Alabama. That will be a tough matchup there. Arkansas will be tough. Texas A&M, though, is a home game, and that's why I put LSU ahead of Texas A&M on this list, because if it comes down to that matchup, let's say both teams lose to Alabama and they beat everyone else, and they're sitting there with one loss at the end of the season, LSU has home field advantage in that game, and that is a big deal, assuming we have normal crowds and everything. So LSU, for me, has a little bit better path than Texas A&M to get in because of the fact that they get A&M at home. And also, if they lose to Alabama, it will be on the road, so you can say, you know, the committee can say, wow, they, you know, let's say they're competitive. You know, they were competitive against Alabama on the road. They beat Texas A&M. You know, there is a really good shot for LSU, not winning the SEC championship, but getting in there with one loss, and they're at number 7. Now, as we get into the rest of these teams, you're going to see the teams that I think have, I mean, they have a really good shot, a much better path. Maybe not quite at number 6 with Oregon, but I think, especially in that top 5. But Oregon, it's all about the schedule here. It's similar to USC. They just don't have a very tough schedule outside of Ohio State. Utah on the road is going to be a tough matchup. Washington on the road is going to be a tough matchup. But other than that, who's going to beat them? And if they're as good as we expect them to be, and talent-wise, I think they're clearly the best team in the Pac-12. If they play Ohio State competitively, they win the rest of their games, they win the Pac-12 championship, they're going to be in that conversation. But let's say they beat Ohio State. You know, they could knock off the Buckeyes. It wouldn't be a huge surprise. We're talking about a young quarterback early in the season for Ohio State, some question marks on defense. So there are a couple of different ways. They upset Ohio State, then maybe they lose to Utah or Washington, but win the Pac-12 championship, then they can go back to that win on their resume over Ohio State. Or they just lose in a competitive game to Ohio State, beat everyone else, then they could be in that conversation. So I think, again, there are a couple of different paths for Oregon. The FBI gives them only a 4.8% chance to get in, but I just think that, you know, I don't think that they're a top 6 team. Again, don't think that that's what these numbers represent, but their path is there, and I could see them potentially sneaking in. All right, now we're talking about the teams that have a really good shot, the top 5. Georgia, right here, you see the schedule. They do play Clemson early, and I think that's the one thing that keeps them from breaking into that top 4, at least in these rankings, because Clemson's going to be a really tough matchup. But everyone else on their schedule, I'm going to tell you right now, unless I change my mind, I'm not going to predict Georgia to lose. I'm not going to give you my prediction on the Clemson game. But other than that game, I'm not going to predict this team to lose to anyone else. I mean, Auburn on the road, a team that we don't know a ton about with a new coach. That's a tricky game. But and, you know, and of course Florida will be pretty good, but I think Georgia still is the better team this year. You know, there's just really not anyone that I think is going to beat Georgia. So let's say win or lose against Clemson, they beat everyone else. They're in the conversation. They have a chance. They'll probably play Alabama in the SEC championship. They'll be playing that game to get into the college football playoff. Let's say they beat Clemson. Let's say they win all of these games. Does the SEC championship even matter? Probably not. They're probably in. So I think Georgia has a really good shot. Again, a team that has a couple of different paths to get in. And again, that Clemson game may not matter, but if they beat Clemson, I think you can go ahead and pencil Georgia into the college football playoff. I really do. That's how big that game is going to be for the Georgia Bulldogs. Number 4, we've got Oklahoma. Oklahoma, you can see their schedule, and again, they don't play anyone all that tough in the non-conference. They do have Iowa State late in the year, but that is a home game for them. And they may play Iowa State twice, but I think this team has a really good shot to get in. Now, I think it's going to be tough to beat Iowa State twice. And just like I said with Iowa State, I think the Cyclones are that good. And as good as Oklahoma is going to be, and they might be the second best team in the country this year. But they could definitely split with Iowa State. That would not be a surprise at all, in my opinion. Then they have Texas. Then they have Oklahoma State on the road. And no, they don't play at Texas. That's just a typo. Oklahoma State on the road. You've got West Virginia. You've got some games on the schedule to where Oklahoma could trip up and they could lose, but still, they've got a really, really good shot to make the college football playoff. In fact, they have the second best chance according to the FBI at 73.2%. And I didn't give you the number for Georgia. Georgia's only at 17.2%, which I think is absurd. I think Georgia, again, has a really good shot to get in. But Oklahoma is right there in that top 4. I think they have one of the 4 best paths to make it into the college football playoff. Does that mean they will? Does that mean I'm going to predict that they will? Again, that is not what this video is. This is not a prediction. We're just looking at these teams' paths and how good I think these teams have a chance to beat. Alabama is at number 3. Might be the best team in the country. And, when you look at the way they're reloading, and you look at Bryce Young, this might be the best team in the country. But I don't think they have the easiest path. I think your top 2 teams are going to have an easier path because you've got LSU, you've got Texas A&M on the road, you got Florida on the road, Miami in the non-conference, the Iron Bowl, potentially a game against Georgia in the SEC Championship. They're going to be favored in probably all of these games, but they're not going to be huge favorites. There are teams that can potentially knock them off, and you do have a young quarterback who looks really good, but has he been in a tough situation on the road in the SEC? No. And so I think Alabama's path is not quite as easy as those top 2 teams that we're about to get to, but still, this team has a great shot, and it's hard to really imagine them losing a regular season game. If they lose to Georgia in the SEC Championship, but that was their only loss, they're probably going to get in. So, this is a team that They can afford a loss. They can slip up and say lose to Texas A&M as long as they get to the SEC Championship and they beat Georgia, they're in. Or maybe they don't even get to the championship. Maybe Texas A&M goes. We've seen Alabama get in that way before. So multiple ways for them to get in. The FBI actually gives them the best shot at making the college football playoff at 76.3%. Let's go to number 2. Ohio State, the Buckeyes, I don't think are the second best team in the country looking at it this year. I don't know if they're even top 4. Now, I think they're definitely top 5. But are they top 4? I don't know. Look at this team. The offense is going to be really good. I mean, you got options at quarterback. Somebody's going to step up. Somebody's going to take that job and run with it. You got talent across the board on offense. Probably the best group of receivers in the country. They're going to be able to score on anybody. But they do have some question marks on defense, especially in the back 7, linebackers, secondary. You have to wonder about that. But even with those questions, who is going to beat this team? Look at this schedule and tell me who is going to beat this team. I don't think anyone is even close to them on the schedule. Oregon, maybe, but that game is at home for Ohio State. Indiana might be their toughest game on the road, but it's after a bye week. Penn State's going to be better this year, but they're not going to be that much better. Michigan, I'm not buying that one. So, again, it's more about this schedule, and I think you could even make an argument for Ohio State at number 1 with the best path to get in because the schedule is just not all that tough. They'll probably play Wisconsin or Iowa or one of those teams out of the West. I don't really see any of those teams being anywhere near Ohio State. So it's just a matter of them not playing any teams that are really on their level. And because of that, even if they're not a top 4 team, they have a really good shot to run the table. And if they do, they're going to get in the college football playoff, no doubt about it. So this is a really good team, a team that I think is above everyone else that they play. And because of that, they have the second best shot at making the college football playoff. But number 1 for me is still going to be Clemson. It's still going to be Clemson. Again, I think you can make an argument for Ohio State at number 1. But we're going to go with Clemson here. Because outside of Georgia, when you look at the rest of their games, the gap between Clemson and their opponents and the gap from Ohio State and their opponents, the gap is just so much bigger for Clemson. I mean, who do they trip up against? I just don't see it. I don't see them tripping up against anyone. And they don't have to beat Georgia. They can lose that game unless they get blown out. They can lose that game. They can come back. They can win the ACC championship, beat maybe a good North Carolina or Miami team in that game. They're going to get in the playoffs. So I think you just look at Clemson, and it's hard to see this team not making it into the playoff as long as they stay healthy at quarterback with DJ Uiagalelei. They have a 64.6% chance according to the FBI. Going back to Ohio State, just a 45% chance to get in. I kind of disagree with that, unless it's because of the schedule for Ohio State not being all that tough, and maybe they think like they lose a game, they may not get in. because that loss is not going to come to a top 10 team, because I don't think they're going to play a top 10 team. Maybe Oregon, we'll see. But I think Clemson is at number 1 here. I think they have the best path. I think that they are the team that you can pretty much go ahead and pencil into the college football playoffs. So for me, Clemson at number 1. But I think all of these teams have a shot, even if it's just a very small chance. I think all of these teams have a chance to get into the college football playoff. It wouldn't surprise me if any of them made it in. I mean, some of the lower teams, it would be a little bit of a surprise, but it wouldn't shock me, let's say that. I don't think a team outside of these 13 teams has a chance, not even a little bit of a chance to make it into the playoff. If another team does get in, that is going to be a major, major surprise. So I want to know if you agree or do you disagree with these 13 teams. Do you think maybe some of them don't even need to be in this conversation? They have no chance. Or is there a team that you think has a chance to get in that I didn't mention? Give me either way, or maybe you disagree with my order. Give me your thoughts, your comments on all of this down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more here on the SG1 Sports College Football Channel.